are in business. We are here for our live Q&A webcast with Powell artist Christina Smith, principal flutist of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. So excited to have this happening today. We'll give everybody a few minutes to join us and log on to their Facebooks and, wrap up those emails or lunches that they're doing. But how are you today, Christina?
I'm great. We don't have a hurricane here, so it's nice and sunny. And
yes. Oh my gosh.
It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, we're sending all of our thoughts, safe thoughts to everybody down on, the coast there in Louisiana and Texas, and stay safe and evacuate. And yeah, scary situation, but I'm glad that at least in the Atlanta area, you guys have some nice sunshine. So
for sure.
Good. So for those of us just joining us today, my name is Kristen Moore. I'm the direct sales specialist here at Powell Flutes, and we're joined by the wonderful Christina Smith, Powell artist and principal flutist of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. We're going to talk today about her gorgeous collection of Powell flutes, ranging in materials from sterling silver to platinum to white gold. And I'm so excited. Your instruments are just absolutely stunning and very unique and special. So I'm excited for our audience to kind of hear the stories behind them and how you approach them and how they're each different and maybe also similar as well.
Yeah, I own 3 vintage Powells, and they are all very different. And the first one I ever bought was one. The first one I ever bought was made in 1952. It's a silver Powell that one of my dearest, oldest students has. And but I bought very shortly after that, about 28 years ago. This is Powell serial number 329, and it's made out of solid silver, B-foot, open hole. And I played this for actually most of my career in the orchestra. And it's an absolutely beautiful flute, very versatile, really just kind of can do anything you want it to do. And then about 12 or 13 years ago, I had the opportunity to buy a really interesting instrument. And this is one of 6 platinum Powells that were handmade by Vern Powell. And I believe this is the second of the 6. And it's interesting, this one is number 327. So this is only 2 serial numbers away from the silver one that I have. Both of them were completed in May of 1938. They were probably both on the finishing bench together. And now they're reunited at last. And I keep wanting to send a shout out to whoever has Powell number 328, so I can get the one in the middle.
Absolutely.
But this is a really interesting instrument. Probably the most remarkable thing about it that is unique is that it has a one-piece body. If you can see, there is no foot joint. It's all one tube, so it has a really long case. So, people are always like, "Oh, what instrument is that?" I'm like, "It's a flute," and they're like, "Oh, it looks like a pool cue or something like that." It's like it's a little bit awkward to cart around. It doesn't fit in any flute bag or anything like that. But anyway, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think that when Mr. Powell made this flute, it was the second platinum one that he made, and I'm just wondering whether he felt like he wanted to experiment with having the tube be all one piece, just so that it might vibrate together better. And I think he's probably right about that. It's a really, this flute oddly plays pianissimo really, really well. You would think, because it's so heavy, that it would be hard to play soft or hard to do finessey kind of things on it, but that is absolutely not the case. It also has a very small embouchure hole, and it's in a kind of a more round or oval shape. It's a different shape than we normally see on old flutes. And it's, to me, it just looks very small for an old Powell. Old Powell flutes tend to typically have like a kind of a bigger embouchure hole. So it's the other thing that I noticed when I go back and forth with this flute is that it's just, it's platinum, it's really heavy. So it's about 4 ounces more than the other flutes that I have, which sounds like, you know, if you're lifting weights, 4 ounces isn't much, but you know, if you're holding a flute for hours and hours, it actually,
It makes a big difference. Yeah.
it really
It
does.
really
Even
does.
1 ounce makes a big difference when you're holding something for that many hours. So, you know, I play a lot on this platinum flute as well. And then the other, the flute that has come into my hands just in the last several years is like, let me just mention the platinum flute was belonged to Joseph Mariano as well,
Oh, wow.
platinum one. So that's also kind of a interesting
Yeah.
fact about it.
Yeah.
But
Longtime
anyway,
professor flute at Eastman and principal of Rochester. Yeah.
exactly, and it was so known as, you know, one of the great pedagogy, you know, one of the great teachers of the 20th century. You know, he taught so many of the greats that are still active
Oh,
and playing today. Too many to name, but yeah. So it's kind of cool that the flute was made. I think it was at one time owned by Mariano, and it. I have a really beautiful recording of Mr. Mariano playing the Bach Sonata in B minor on this flute, and it's really, really beautiful.
oh, wow.
But anyway, then the third Powell that I have 3 Powells. That's all I have, and this is a really amazing flute that was made in 1950, and it wasn't made for the original owner, but it was purchased, I think, within 1 year of its being made by the original owner, who was a man named Fritz Baker. And he was a professional flutist. He played in Colorado and San Diego, an orchestral player. And the very remarkable thing about this flute, serial number 900, made in 1950, is it's the only flute made out of white gold that Mr. Powell ever made. And it's a really, really spectacular flute. It is in 3 pieces, and 8-foot solid 14 karat white gold. And
Yeah. And when you say all white gold, you know, when a customer is interested nowadays in a white gold flute, it's just going to be the tubing that's white gold. And then they can either do sterling silver mechanism or 10 karat yellow gold, 14K rose gold mechanism. But your special flute number 900 is entirely mechanism included all white gold.
exactly. And I'll share with you that the owner of this flute, Mr. Baker, Fritz Baker, was the only owner for years until the time of his death, which was several years ago. And the flute was sold to a very kind gentleman in California who allowed me to play on it because he knew I played old Powells and I loved old Powells. And he really believed, he's a bit of he's a flutist and a collector of sorts. And he believes that these beautiful old Powells should be played. And he knew I would play it. And of course I do play it. And he generously allowed me to play on it for a couple of years. And now I'm in the process of buying it from him, which is really, really special. But so Mr. Baker, Fritz Baker's daughters were just these wonderful ladies. I've not met them in person, but one of his daughters last week sent me a folder full of kind of memorabilia about this flute, and unsolicited, and I'm just blown away by having this. And I, you know, of course, assured her that I would take such good care of it. You know, this is so meaningful for me to have this. But these are actually some letters that are on original paper,
Wow.
and handwritten by Mr. Powell about the flute, and they're or on clearly what was written on a typewriter. In fact,
Oh my God.
see if I can share this with you.
Yeah.
Maybe you can see. Are you able to see this?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
see this letter. This is
Wow.
probably written in 1950 or 51. This letter, handwritten, and it's just so. If you look at Mr. Powell's handwriting, it's so beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Oh my gosh.
Just the handwriting. There's these letters, correspondence between Fritz Baker and Vern Powell, and it's so great. And he says about this white gold flute, he says, the metal is incredibly tough to work. We had plenty of headaches, including darn near ruining every tool in the shop, but the results were terrific. It has everything a platinum flute has, including a tremendous timbre, but it is not as heavy. It has an elegant, warm appearance without the gaudiness of a yellow gold flute. Kind of interesting. Opinion. That's totally a matter of opinion, of course. Yeah, and he in another letter he says it has a ring and a brilliance I've never heard in any flute. And then yeah, it's just he also said, this is an interesting one. He said, I've never heard about the white gold flute. I've never heard of any other flute makers producing one, and it is certainly the only one we have made. After all the difficulties we had in fabricating the hard metal, we have no intention of attempting another one, in spite of the marvelous results when the flute is finished. And then he says, like just to speak to what you said earlier, Kristen, he says, if the occasion should arise, we might someday make a flute with a white gold tube and all silver mechanism, as it was the mechanism that presented the real problem where the hardness of the white gold showed up. So, to your point, I think that's one of the really interesting things about this flute. It's white gold flutes, you can get them, but you don't see them with a white gold mechanism and keys and all of that.
Yeah, and that's just the material is just so dense, the alloy that's making up those other 10 carats to bring it to 24, the zinc, the nickel, all of those other things are just making it so hard, so dense, and breaking machinery. So maybe someday as technology gets better, it's something we'll venture into way down the line. But now yours is the only one in existence that's all 14 karat white gold, and truly very, very special. So for those of us who are just joining us, my name is Kristen Moore from Powell Flutes, speaking here with Christina Smith, principal flutist of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra and a Powell artist. And this beautiful collection that you have, it might be a good time right now if you're willing to play a little bit. And I think our audience is probably very curious to hear what these flutes sound like. I know that when I first met you, when I very first started with Powell a few years ago, you had played an incredible recital in Chicago, half of it on your platinum flute and half of it on your 14K white gold. And I think, probably in the audience, we went into it like, I wonder if we'll notice a difference. And oh my gosh, it's a very startling difference. So, we know that as good as the Zoom technology is, it might not totally come across, but I think it'll be a treat for our audience if you wouldn't mind, kind of sharing those timbre differences. We'll see if we can pick out the differences and whatnot.
I will. So, what I'm going to do for you, and you can see if this is audible on the internet, but I'm going to 3 Daphneses and Chloes. The plural of Daphnes and Chloe. Daphneses and Chloe.
Daphne.
Daphne. Yeah. And so I'm going to play them on the 3 flutes and just see what you notice. See if even on the internet you hear if there are differences between these flutes. So this is I'm going to start with the silver. This is Powell number 329, made in 1938. Okay, so that's the silver, and now I'm going to move to the. I guess I'm playing them in lightest to heaviest. So this is the white gold, number 900, made in 1950.
Wow.
And then last but not least, here we have Powell number 327, also made in 1938. And this is the platinum tube, one piece body. And the keys on this flute are silver. Okay. Oh, you're muted, Kristen. Maybe.
You're also beautiful. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Views maybe. But wow, they were all so different, and each had their own personalities. And so if our audience in the comments, you want to let us know what you heard, even I think through webcast Zoom technology, it you could still hear those distinct color differences, and the darkness of the platinum. And I love that color range that you can achieve on the white gold. I think so. Smith.
Hey, Kristen, I missed a lot of that. I couldn't hear you. It might be a internet issue. Not sure. So sorry. I can't hear you. Um, yeah, but yeah, it might be an internet. I'm not sure if it's my end or your end. But I'm not sorry I missed. Oh, okay. So we have a chat here to save us from these instances. So the differences in playing these three flutes. I think because they're all handmade by this same person, and within probably about 12 years of each other, um, they all play very similarly if you're used to playing old Powells. So, like I said, I think the silver is really versatile. It kind of can do anything. It can do, um, in terms of color, you can push it in a lot of different directions, I would say. It's kind of just like your middle of the road great flute. And I'm so glad that I have it. And the white gold, I would say, is the one that probably has like what we refer to as colors in the sound. It's like it, the reason that people play gold, I think, for a lot of people is that it adds these colors to the sound that aren't like readily available maybe in the silver or platinum flute. And the white gold definitely has that for me. But the reason I don't play yellow gold myself is because I don't think I sound good on yellow gold. I mean, obviously, I'm going to play whatever flute I think I sound good on. And I've always found that yellow gold kind of makes me sound a little like too syrupy or something. And the white gold, for me, has the really nice aspects of yellow gold, those colors that people love in the gold flutes, but it also has kind of that more maybe darker sound that you can get with the silver, or pure sound you get with the silver. And then with the platinum is just so heavy. It's just a very, it just really, you pick it up and people go, oh my gosh, this is so heavy. And the keys are silver, so it's not even like as heavy as it could be. But the platinum is just a really, it's a very dark, what I would say is an orchestral flute. Like this is a flute that does great, like I would play it on like probably Mahler symphonies, it has like this big orchestral dark sound to it. But oddly, it also does, like like it does that too. Like it does these really easy pianissimos. So, it's just great to have options, I guess, to options for depending on what, what I have to play. Just
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. Can you hear me?
now I can hear you. Yes.
All right. We're gonna ditch the technology, the separate microphone, and no matter how many tests we do, there's always it's gonna keep us on our toes. So
I know maybe less is more, right?
right, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you, for describing those differences. And I guess while cut out, I was saying that I, had the chance to try number 900 when the previous owner sent it to Powell Flute, our 90th anniversary a few years ago. And I mean, I was amazed that, like, you really have to work that flute to get it to vibrate and really support, it's very, so I then can imagine that the platinum is even more so.
It is, and yeah, people often say like, when you play the older Powells, they're harder to play and they're hard work. I don't notice that because I've played old Powells my entire career. Um, and I think I'm the kind of person, I'm probably wired to play these flutes because I'm the kind of person that much prefers the manual transmission than the automatic transmission. Like I like to be in
Hmm.
control of what I'm doing, and that like when I'm like I don't want the flute to do it for me. Like I want to do it. So I think that
Right.
like
Yep.
I'm wired that way. Like I think that's why I don't feel like these are hard to play at all. Like but I'm so used to them. Uh, but the new Powells and the new flutes in general are also they're both beautiful and have all the bells and whistles and all that. And but every flute, it's like a relationship. Like you have to get to know
Absolutely.
it. You have to know what all of its hot buttons are, the things you can
Yeah.
do, the things you can't say to it, and then the things that are just wonderful and make you happy. So every flute is like that, no matter what it's made out of, no matter when it's made. I mean, I think,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah. So it's like the I think the all of our hero players that are playing today, I mean, part of what makes them sound great is that they probably know their instruments so well.
Right, right. Absolutely. It takes a long time to, when you change your instrument, even when you just change your head joint, to get used to it and like you said, yeah, find its quirks and, maybe you have to adjust things in yourself. And I think what's one of the coolest parts about when you really connect to an instrument is it makes you a better flutist. It really brings you to that next level. Whether it's because it's an instrument with an older scale and you really have to use your ears more, or mechanism, if it's just, the best technology and your fingers can fly now, it's that connection is so important and it takes time to develop.
It really does. I totally agree. And that's as much what we are doing when we work, when we're practicing, when
Yeah.
we're honing our skills. As yeah, we're practicing scales, arpeggios, long tones, etudes, and all of that. But we're also part of it is just getting to really know your instrument.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. So you kind of had hinted at it a little bit before, but I wonder if you might elaborate more on, how do you decide which flute to use in different contexts? I know you said that the platinum is really great for Mahler when you want to dig in like that, but, when might you decide to go with your 14K white gold, or if you still, on a consistent basis, use your silver flute?
My silver flute, I play probably the least right now.
Hmm.
But it used to be the only one I played. um,
Yeah.
it's the one I play the least. I play it like when I'm getting COAs on the other flutes, or I'll just pick it up and be like, oh, I forgot how great this flute is.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I would say like the last couple of years, I've primarily played the 900 white gold in the orchestra because I think it has a color or colors I that are not as accessible on my other flutes. And I notice on listening to playbacks of the orchestra or broadcasts and things like that it just has a little bit more dimension. Part of when you're an orchestral player, when you're deciding what instrument you're going to buy or play, or if you have multiple instruments, is you do have to assess like what sounds best in the space that you're playing. So your
Mm,
symphony hall, where our symphony hall is not very good in Atlanta, so the more like colors you can get in the sound, the more you're present in the hall. Um,
mm,
where if you're playing in a fantastic symphony hall, like in Boston or Carnegie Hall or whatever, you can hear a pin drop, and the little micro colors in the sound are all there. So even if you're playing a very dark instrument, you can still hear it because the acoustics are so good. So that's part of it too. But I
ah,
primarily the last few years have been playing 900 because it's a newer instrument to me, and I've been trying to get to know it and play it in all different situations.
yeah.
But I would say like the bigger, heavier, you know, Mahler, Scriabin, a lot of Stravinsky, those
Mm.
kinds of works, I would probably gravitate more toward the platinum, because it's just like a, I don't say this in a negative way, but it's almost like a steelier sound. If you need something like that for certain,
Sure.
we play a lot of new music in Atlanta. It can be good for that. So that's kind of my uh, how I decide what I'm.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. I think as flutists maybe are changing instruments or thinking about going to, we called this webcast precious metal flutes, going from, okay, I have a silver flute, maybe I want something more out of my sound, really good things to consider. And maybe we can dive into that a little bit more towards the end, but I would love to hear talk about your amazing career. You are going into your 30th year with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, which I think is just incredible. Um, you know, I bet, yeah. How has it changed over your tenure? Has the concept of sound changed? And I'm sure of course the personnel has altered a bit. Could you speak to that?
Absolutely. Just by definition, in a 30-year time span, nothing can stay the same, right? So the orchestra has changed dramatically since when I joined. And it's for a number of reasons. Obviously, change in personnel, even one change in personnel in a woodwind section is going to make a difference. And I'll say
Mm.
that now I'm uh, one of the old timers in the section. I mean, I don't feel like it, but I am. I mean, I've been on the audition committee of almost every single person in my woodwind section now, because I've been there a really long time. So I've seen a lot of change. And the other change is just, when you change music directors, every music director has their own aesthetic of what they value, what's important to them.
Mm.
What kind of repertoire is their forte, like what do they do really well, what do they like to record, um,
Ah.
what do they like to take when we go to Carnegie Hall, like what kinds of repertoire. And so the two music directors that I've only had two in my 30 years, and they're both like polar opposites from each other. So when I started my
Interesting.
career, I was hired by Yoel Levy, and he was my music director for the first 10 years. And then my second music director, who I still have, is Robert Spano, and I've had him for 20 years. And Mr. Levy was just he's like a very like precise musician. He really values playing together, playing in tune, playing like a well-oiled machine. That's like his whole MO. And so I'm really glad that when I started my career, I actually had that. It was a very, very disciplined atmosphere on stage. And I actually, I mean, as much as like there were times that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't work here anymore. But it was like, because he was very hard to work for in many ways. But
Mm.
at the same time, I have a lot of gratitude, because as a young player, having discipline when you first set foot in the orchestra, like I had 2 years of music conservatory, then I just turned 20 and I moved to Atlanta and started working.
Oh my
So
God.
it's like, I didn't have any professional experience or anything like that. I'm actually really grateful that the experience I had it started with like a more disciplined
Mm.
approach. And then
Yeah.
Robert Spano, I love working for. He's just an absolute genius. Absolutely, like playing new music, I don't ever want to play with anybody except him. I mean, he's just amazing. He's a very collaborative boss, music director. Like he really encourages all the players to take risks, and if you do something on stage that's like outside the lines, he just kind of goes with you. He doesn't say like my way or the highway. He's not like that at all. And yeah, he's very, very collaborative, very much trusts the musicians in front of him.
Mm.
And that was a real change, gear shift for me. Yeah, so that has really changed the sound of the orchestra itself. I would say like when I joined the orchestra, our woodwind section had a much like darker, cohesive sound, and
Sure.
now we have kind of a freer, perhaps more colorful sound. So, and
Mm.
I don't say that critiquing either side. I think there's value to both.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of touched on a little bit, but oh my gosh, joining, as principal of an orchestra at 20 years old, fresh out of Curtis. And was that just like a total shock to the system? I mean, fortunately your conductor there, his approach kind of helped a little bit, but, you know, what kind of, like, looking back, is there anything you would have liked to have told your younger self, or maybe our aspiring audience members?
Oh, there's a lot of things I would have told my younger self. But I think, um, yeah, like when you're that young, I think you don't know what you don't know. Like
Mm.
you don't, like I think I joined the orchestra and I was like, oh, like this is fun and a lot of I mean I did have a lot of repertoire that I was playing for the first time, obviously just because I was so young. But a lot of the repertoire I did know because I was one of those super geeky kids who, I would go into my bedroom and put on my CD of the Cleveland Orchestra with George Zell playing all the Beethoven symphonies, and I had all my first flute parts, and I would just play along. Like I could play many of them with my folder closed. Like I was just obsessive about playing in an orchestra, and so it didn't feel like so unfamiliar to me because I had a lot of, like, as a student I had a lot of knowledge and experience. Of course, it's nothing like where you know deal out a new program every single week at the level that you're expected. But I think I thought, it's fun, and like almost like, when you go to a music festival, it's like, oh, this is fun, everybody, and we're playing a new program every week. But then, the thing that doesn't register with you when you're young is like having to do that week after week, year after year, decade after decade, and keep that same focus and level and expectation of yourself. That's what you don't realize when you're young. and
Yeah,
and the way
that's
you,
a lot of discipline.
a lot of discipline, and also having the kind of mind that when you come back to a piece like the Beethoven's Fifth for the 500th time you've played it, like, how am I going to make this, like, because someone in the hall, it's their first time hearing it.
Right,
And
right.
like, how do you make it just so exquisitely beautiful? How do you do things differently or better than the last time you played it? I mean, it's always for me, that's what it's about, and that is what is really difficult about having a long-term orchestral career.
Mm, that makes sense. Yeah. And I would imagine, yeah, keeping that in your mind of I'm playing to a young 10 starry-eyed 10-year-old, or somebody that is just getting into their career. You're playing for them, and yeah, that helps keeps things fresh and keep you on your toes. Wow. Yeah, and that's such a different perspective, because we all just, I think, often tend to think like you get the job and now you're good, and it's the big picture of it.
Exactly. Like, you're good when you get the job, but the long haul, you can't underestimate the toll that it takes. I mean, it's a very tough, it's a tough journey, I think. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that like my idols in orchestral playing, like they have kept that that feeling that, like, oh my gosh, the Schumann symphonies, oh, they're so gorgeous. Like 30 years later, I'm still like, every time I see a Schumann symphony, I'm just like, it's like the first time I've heard it or I've played it, because I just think they're so beautiful. And it's like keeping that love and that inspiration for the long
Mm.
haul, and also keeping your own ability and your own skills at a top level. It's,
Right.
as it's like being a professional athlete. Like, you have to just always keep working at it. Obviously, the older you get, the harder it is. Lots of pieces were easy when I was 20. They're a lot harder now. So, like, those are the things that I think of, like, about my experience.
Wow. Well, I thank you so much for sharing that. And, for our audience who's watching and listening right now, if you have any questions for Christina, please feel free, type them in the comments. We'd love to address any of your questions that you might have. Um, but, if we can dive back a little bit, you were at Curtis and you studied with, I mean, every flutist knows Julius Baker. What was that like? I mean, it's, you know, every flutist idol, I think, and who we look to for sound and ideas and musical concepts.
Yeah, it was amazing to study with Julius Baker. So when I studied with Mr. Baker, he was an older man. He was long retired from the New York Philharmonic. In fact, I remember we celebrated his 75th birthday party at while I was a student. So
Oh,
he was
yeah.
already like kind of beyond performing, like in his retirement in a way.
Hmm.
But he was still teaching full time at Curtis and Juilliard, and also he used to teach at Carnegie Mellon. For those who are old enough to remember that, he used to be on the faculty there. So he would take the train, between all the schools, and then go home to his place in Danbury, Connecticut. When I studied with him, he was incredible, and he was Mr. Baker was like the kind of teacher that is he didn't ever really like get really granular with me or with I think a lot of his students. He was just kind of like he was very cut and dried. Like he was the kind of teacher that was like, well, you just need to practice more. And I'd be like, Mr. Baker, how do you make your vibrato so shimmery like that? And he'd be like, just vibrate. Like, like you know what I mean? Like so in some ways, like he wasn't the kind of teacher that would ever like fix up your problems. Like if you have any fundamental problems, like I think things came so naturally to him that he just like he didn't either think about it or he wasn't even aware of how great he was when he did it. But the thing about Mr. Baker that for me was the takeaway was that I could not go through one lesson if I played with a bad sound on one note, I had to go back to the beginning and start over again. He cared so much about the quality of the sound. And if you didn't like your sound on one note, then that's what you worked on. So for me, that was like my probably biggest takeaway. The other biggest takeaway from studying with Mr. Baker is just what I said earlier. It's like I think he was the kind of person that practiced every single day for multiple hours. And somebody told me that even up until the week before he died, he was practicing 1 to 2 hours a day. And I think that he took tremendous joy in doing the work. I think he always really liked to be good. Like he really he liked to have great technique. Like, and I remember lessons I had with him, like when I was a freshman, and I had the 8 a.m. lesson because he liked to teach really early. He's an older guy who's like gets up early to bed, early to rise. So I had this 8 o'clock in the morning lesson. And for those who don't know this, at the Curtis Institute, probably at Juilliard too, when you walked into your lesson, you always had to have a pianist. So you had to have prearranged to have some pianist sitting there with you at 8 o'clock in the morning. Boy, did I owe a lot of favors to the pianist at Curtis. But you had to have a pianist, and you walked in, and you started with the Voliere, Carnival of the Animals, with piano accompaniment from memory, and then you played the second movement of the Bach C major sonata from memory with the piano accompanist, and then you started your lesson. So he liked his students to have really good double tonguing, obviously. But if I got in there and it was like 8 o'clock and I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired, and I'd play the Voliere and I would have like flubbed a note or two or something, and he'd be like, no, and then like he'd pick up his flute and be like, and I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like he could wipe the floor with me, like at 75 years old. So there's something about that, and especially now that I'm older, realizing what it takes to be in that kind of shape and have that kind of dedication and discipline. Like, he used to just say, like, if you want to be good, just practice. Like that was his solution so many times for things. And you know what? It sounds oversimplified, but it's not. It's
right.
not like you can really learn how to do anything if you spend the right time on it.
That's true. Yeah. So and if you can play Voliere at 8 a.m.,
you're never afraid of it again. Yeah. I know, But so like that was my experience studying with him. I mean, those elements really inspired me and influenced me in the way that I work now, and especially the way that I worked when I first got my job in Atlanta. The other thing about the lessons with Mr. Baker is that he really wanted you to play a new piece every week. Like, so you were playing a brand new sonata or a concerto or a solo piece or whatever every single week. You had to have a pianist. You had to have rehearsed it with the pianist. So the amount of practicing alone that took really prepared me for the job that I have, because we have to churn out a new program every single week. And so that was great, great training.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, it sounds like it really was. And wow, to just have that pedagogy and that influence is so special. We do have a question from our audience. Hello, Barbara from Naperville, very familiar with Naperville. She is asking, are all of the head joints original to their respective flutes? Thanks, Barbara.
That's a great question, because I know that sometimes people who play old instruments, and like people, all flutists, we like to switch up our equipment all the time. But I'm a bit of a purist. All three of these head joints are absolutely the original, and nothing has been done. Sometimes people take the old head joints and they'll put on a new lip plate, or they'll recut it or in some way to have a little bit more undercutting, so that has like more response or whatever. But no, I have all three original heads, and nothing has been changed. I will say just one thing about two of the flutes that I have, not the white gold, but the silver and the platinum. I've had both of them like moderately retuned. So when you see, like, sometimes when you think of retuning a flute, you think of seeing all those old Louis Lott flutes where they actually make a cut in the tube and they move the tone hole around and they resolder it on, and then the flute looks like it's had major surgery, But it's not like that. I've had and I don't think you can. Yeah, you won't be able to see it on a camera, but I have on a few of the keys a few little discs that are put into the tone hole itself. They're in there with epoxy. They can be removed. It can go back to its original state anytime. But they're like a tiny little crescent in some of the keys. It's barely noticeable. In the thumb key, it's a little bit bigger of a crescent. It's a technique that's used sometimes on old Powells to make the scale a little bit better. I think you do give up a little bit in resonance anytime you put something in the tone hole, but it's a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis. But I have had that done to these flutes, but it's not a permanent.
It's almost like a smaller G disc in a few of your other tone holes.
That's right. Is that what it's called, a G disc, where people have it's a modified splitty?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So Powell lingo, we call it a G disc, or sometimes you'll see it as a donut because it actually looks like a donut. Ours is a crescent shape, but it takes up, about, I'd say, half of the tone hole.
Yeah, and these a lot of these are so small it looks like a cat's whisker. I mean, it's very, very small in some of the keys, and then others it's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a vintage Powell myself from 1956, and compared to my modern flute, I really don't play the vintage one just because the intonation is so different and quirky. You really have to know where every note is. And I mean, it's a gorgeous flute. I love playing it, but you really have to manipulate that scale a lot. So that makes sense. That's a good little trick. If any of our audience out there has some older flutes with scales that are not quite what they are now.
Exactly.
Yeah, we do have another question. So Jean-Francois, thank you so much. He's asking, how would you define Powell flutes compared to other brands? And what's the difference and what makes them better?
That's a great. Well, of course they're better.
Exactly.
I do believe that flutes are really personal, and you have to play on what you love and what you
agree.
Fit on. But I would say the difference between a Powell is I personally think that Vern Powell was an absolute just unqualified genius. The techniques that he used to make flutes, he was a genius. He was a consummate artist and a perfectionist, and he cared so much about sound quality. And that's what attracts me to Powell's and the Powell Company, because for me, when I say what's important about a flutist playing, it's the quality of the sound. And maybe I'm a old curmudgeon now. Maybe I've been called too old school. But, so like for me, like for example, when I'm judging a competition and I hear 3 finalists play, like if one of them plays flawlessly and has amazing technique, but I don't like their sound, it's really hard for me to get past that.
Yeah.
It's weird, but that's how I am. But for me, the reason I'm so into Powell's is because I feel like the tradition that was established by Vern Powell is it resonates with me, because the thing that's important about the flutes is the quality of the sound. And for me, like, okay, smooth mechanism, okay, scale, okay, those are things that are important. But if I don't like the sound, and people say, oh, Powell's are out of tune, and I'm like, no, every flute is out of tune. It's just what you're willing to tolerate. And if the sound quality is good, then that's what I want to play on. I mean, when Powell made a flute, like one of the things he says in these letters, like this is the 900, the white gold here. Like you can take your finger here. I'm just kind of flicking the end of this tube, and I feel the vibration in my left hand. Like that was one of his big trademarks. All of my Powells do that, and that was really important to him. And of course, that makes a difference when you're blowing air through a tube. It has this vibrancy to it, and that is the tradition that is in the Powell Company, and that is why I play Powell's.
We couldn't ask for better to represent our flutes, so we're so thrilled to have you as one of our artists. And there's that idea, that concept of the Powell sound for a reason, because as you mentioned, that is, I think, the most important thing. If you don't enjoy what the person is playing, like you said, but it's perfect, but you just don't like it, you're not going to listen to it. But if that sound is there and it captivates you and draws you in, and that's really what's going to keep a listener engaged.
That's right. Like I say to my students, no one wants to hear Shakespeare read in a whiny voice. Right?
I love it. Oh, wow. So I guess, we have a few minutes left, and, if our audience has any other questions, we're happy to answer them. But, we kind of touched on it before, but, if somebody's thinking about switching from a lighter, whether it's silver or whatnot flute, to a heavier, a precious metal flute, do you have any advice for how they can approach it, as somebody who has the silver and has the gold and whatnot?
I do. I think the biggest adjustment when you're going from a silver flute or a lighter walled flute to something that's by definition a white gold or a yellow gold or a platinum is going to be significantly heavier. Even if it's 1 ounce, like we were saying before, it does make a difference in how you feel and your body. So I would say that it's really important to do a trial where you really play that flute for a good week, and you play like for a couple of hours every day, and to really feel how this feels. Go back and forth between your flute and the one that you're considering. And the other thing is, I think it's really important to connect with some people that really know you're playing, like your colleagues, your friends, whether it's your teacher or your classmates, or colleagues if you're a professional, and really do like a blind test and really play the flutes back to back, like of course in a COVID safe situation, but to play the flutes back to back and really get some feedback on how the sound is coming across and how you feel about it. Also, be sure that when you try everything that you play, like if you're an orchestral player, like try like 10 excerpts that are lyrical, tonguing, loud, fast, slow, all of that.
Yep.
Try all different repertoire that you would be playing, and that you play routinely. That's really, really important. You can also, like, I think it's really important to record yourself. Like, I think
Mm.
that, like, most smartphones have a pretty good recording app. You could put it on the other side of the room. You can hear stuff. You can hear differences in sound, even
Yep,
on electronic devices.
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, the other thing that to consider when you're going from a silver to a heavier flute is, it's going to be heavier, but that is also usually translated into it's a little bit more resistant because it
Hmm.
takes a little bit more air pressure to make the tube vibrate. And is that
Hmm.
something that you're ready for, or you're comfortable with, or you think would you could eventually grow into and make it your own, and you get so much out of it, like that's your next step? Those are all the things that I would be thinking
Mm.
about.
Yeah, I think those are really good points and really smart. And, you mentioned having that trusted network, friend, colleague, teacher, and it's a little tough right now, but, kind of uh, on our end, we're trying to help, our flute customers with that. We're sending out, professional quality microphones with our trial shipments so that we can, I can't see you in person, or your teacher can't see you in person, but, with a through a screen, through a nice microphone, it helps a little bit. And then, too, I, in my own experience from going from a lightweight silver to a gold flute, I found my gold flute, it lets me know when I'm not in shape. When I think we all took some time off when the COVID really was setting in and everything was getting canceled. And I think, it was a healthy thing to step away from our instruments for a little bit and coming back and it's like, okay, yep, not as in shape as I was. Thank you for letting me know.
That's right. It takes more
Yeah.
air, right?
It does, yeah. But I found for me at least, I was, when I have my gold flute, I'm able to, you put more air into it. And for me, I felt like I was able to get more resonance and a bigger sound. I didn't have to work so hard to cut through the orchestra. The flute kind of did a little bit of that for me, which is really nice.
For sure.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I just want to, so I know that today's Thursday. Tomorrow, you're going to be doing another little chat online. So if our audience wants to hear from you, 8 p.m. Eastern, you're talking with fellow
Yeah.
members of the symphony.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. So there's a Facebook page for the Atlanta Symphony musicians, and the name of the page is ATL Symphony Musicians, and we have a live chat that's happening at 8 o'clock tomorrow, and it's
Oh,
the flute section of the Atlanta Symphony. I have an awesome section. And we're just going to be, it's called Backstage Banter. It's very cash. You can ask
oh,
us anything. We're just probably going to be like drinking wine in our houses and talking about what we're doing right now,
love it.
what's in our garden and stuff like that. And it's going to be really fun, and it's moderated by one of my other awesome colleagues, our English horn player in the ASO. She's going to be moderating it, and you can tune in and just listen and watch. Um, we've got two other Powell players at least in my section. A couple of
Yes.
old Powells actually, an 800 and something and a 900 and something. So
Wow. You guys are the vintage Powell section.
no, I started a trend. I know, who knew?
Well, and
Um,
it's funny if so next month, as we of course have to plug our next Powell webcast. On September 24th is our next one, and it's going to be with the entire Cleveland Orchestra Flute section, who are all Powell players. So, we love you having those Powell families out there, and tomorrow night sounds like it'll be a blast. Bring a beverage and enjoy that.
Definitely. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah. And we just got one more question, and it's 3 o'clock, but if you wouldn't mind, I think this is such a wonderful question. It's
Sure.
coming from Laura. And Laura is asking, how have you juggled being a professional player with being a mother? It's very important for young people to know it's possible. I totally agree. Thanks,
Oh,
Laura.
I don't know if I've juggled anything. I mean, it is the biggest job you'll ever have. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think I underestimated how hard it was going to be. Um,
Mm.
but I have two daughters, and they're currently in ninth and 11th grade, so they're somewhat, can fend for themselves a little bit more than when they were little. But when they were little, it was excruciating. I don't think I've ever been so tired in my life. But you start to get, once you have kids, it's like you don't know what you did with all your time before that. When you have little kids, like babies, toddlers, elementary school, but you start to just get good at fragmenting your day. Like, oh, someone's taking a nap, blah, 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 and then like you just get good at just like shifting gears quickly. I think the hardest part in some ways was like when most people are like winding down for the day and you're like putting your feet up, maybe watching a TV show or whatever. I'm done. 8 o'clock at night, you have to be at your, for me, like I had to be at my most alert and most like in the zone after like, being up with kids and school and stuff like that. So that part's really hard, but people do it. I did it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. It's yeah, you just get good at like compartmentalizing and managing your time in fragments during the day and getting stuff done whenever you can. But it's the best journey ever is having kids. It's like I highly recommend it. You can do it.
It's worth it. Wonderful. Well, thanks for that great question, Laura. And thanks for, sharing. I know it's a bit of a personal one, but I think it's, it's something that we probably don't talk about very much. And I think it's worth discussing. And, instead of being a taboo subject, we might as well address it and support each other through it. So very good. Well, Christina, thank you so much. To our audience out there, thank you for tuning in. Of course, this is part of our Buffet Crampon Together at Home webcast series. We have our next episode next Thursday, 2 o'clock, with low brass specialist Declan Lynch. He'll be chatting with the Chicago Lyric, my hometown, Chicago Lyric trombone section, all about their corta instruments. So to our low brass friends or to our dealers out there, make sure to tune into that. But Christina, thank you. I always love the chance to chat with you and catch up. And your instruments, they're beautiful. The way you play them is just incredible. It was so lovely to hear you and to chat.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute honor and pleasure.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.